Wow, this is so wrong. It's big brain thinking, but it's so wrong. And here's why. Actually, I should rephrase that. We don't actually know at the end of the day how the planets were formed, but they have a rough idea on how Earth and Venus formed. In their early days, Mars, Earth and Venus more or less started exactly the same way. They were covered in very thick layers of dust and fog. But unfortunately for Mars, it just didn't have enough gravity to hold on to all the atmosphere because it was so much smaller. So unfortunately for Mars, it started to lose its atmosphere, and it's still losing its atmosphere today. But after the protoplanet stage, Earth and Venus were covered in a very thick layer of fog. Basically, around every single star in the universe, there is something called the Goldilocks zone. Now, if anyone grew up with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you'll get the idea. Essentially, it is an area around the star's orbit where liquid water could exist. In the case of Mars, it's too cold, and in the case of Venus, it's too hot. But with Earth, it is just right. But in the very early solar system, this was not so much the case. They believe that Earth started to settle down and form oceans. Whether you want to believe it came from rain or a comet or wherever is up to you. And they believe that the same thing happened on Venus. Venus, back in the day, 4 billion years ago when it formed, it could have had oceans when it was young. But with all that steam in the atmosphere that we talked about before, plus the enhanced sunlight for being slightly closer to the sun, it led to what is called a runaway greenhouse. Unlike Earth, where it was colder and it had a chance to cool down, Venus never lost its steamy clouds because it was too hot, and like a thermal blanket, it trapped the heat in forever. The hotter it got, the more steam boiled off the oceans, and the planet got locked in a global greenhouse effect, and it meant disaster. And naturally, Venus's oceans gradually just boiled away. And a moment of silence for poor Venus, but it's stuck like that forever. The heat that is trapped underneath those clouds is there to stay. And because the atmosphere is now mostly carbon dioxide, it physically cannot escape. There is actually a theory that every few million years or so, it gets so hot that the planet literally just melts. And when I say melts, I mean melts into just a planet-wide flood of lava. Which is why when the Magellan spacecraft mapped out the surface of Venus completely, and scientists started counting impact craters, the premise being, if a surface has more craters, it's older, and if it has fewer craters, it's younger, they found that the craters seem to be just scattered randomly across the planet, as if the entire surface formed at the same time. So it's a nice little theory, but this happened billions of years ago, and the only life on Earth at the time was microorganisms. Why is Venus in the situation that it is now? Circumstance. It really could have ended up being Earth's twin after all, but unfortunately it was just too close to the sun. R.I.P. Venus.